Thank you for joining us on the session, leading through change, leading through adversity. And so tonight, I'm your facilitator, Dr. Adrian Donato, Principal and Chief Change Officer for Donato Consulting Services. Been a faculty member as well for USC for 7 years, and then moved into more of a consulting role. And had the opportunity come up to do a Trojan Connects session. And I talked to Simone about it. I turned in our documentation, and they were really excited about the idea of leading through adversity. My big idea from the beginning was to get the LADWP involved. And I'm so glad that it worked out to have Zariah and Joe with us. Joe is the Chief Customer Officer and Senior Assistant General Manager of Communications and Community Affairs for LADWP. And if you could fit all that into one word, then you're doing, in one breath, you're doing well, okay? So Joe has a lot of experience, 30 years of experience, leadership, communications that he brings, and leading through crises and adversity. And so this is going to be great to hear from Joe. And then Zariah Oliver Griffin, Chief Resiliency and Emergency Officer for LAWP. Again, very experienced individual. You can see them as well live on YouTube in the LADWP commissioner meetings that come up every other Tuesday, and so or Monday, I think it is, at 10 o'clock. So I catch those sometimes, and you can see them in action there as well. So tonight, our theme, leading through adversity, and there was one word I forgot to put that to alter out there, which was change out the change, right? And so in terms of our agenda for this evening, I just want to highlight, welcoming objectives. We'll have our session introduction. Joe and Zariah will share out as our keynote speakers leading through adversity. And then I'll kind of jump in afterwards and get into leadership reflection and facilitating that time, career connections and facilitating that, career goals and thinking through that in relation to leadership and opportunity. And then we'll get into application. Okay, so again, we're thrilled that everybody is here. Our objectives, we want to just take some time to reflect on key leadership principles. But as we're going through this session this evening, I just want to remind us to be thinking about how am I going to reach into people's lives that I'm spending time with tonight in our small groups. So, one objective will be to send a message to a person that you met tonight. Another one would be to offer a connection or resource to someone that you met tonight. Schedule a follow-up conversation with someone that you met tonight. And then text yourself one adversity that you're currently facing and a strategic clarity insight that it is revealing for you. And so really, as we're going through this evening, very short hour and fraction that we have together, these are kind of the things that, as an alumni association, we would just like you to be thinking about to create network and to participate in this larger family of the Trojan network, and then applying these leadership principles on adversity that we're going to learn from Zariah and from Joe and their experience over the years in their different careers. So with that in mind, then, I really don't want to take any more time from Joe and Zariah to be able to jump in. The format, Joe and Zariah are going to share out. Zariah first, talking a little bit about leadership principles, applying that to the Palisades fires, and then Joe sharing out some of his experiences, and then applying that to Granada Hills. And then after they share out, we're going to have a time for some Q&A, okay? And we'll get about 15 minutes of Q&A with Joe and Zariah, and then they will be heading out, and we'll continue on with the leadership principles and applications that we've got planned for this evening. So that's kind of how we're looking at this. They've prepared a slide deck as well. And Zariah, I believe you're a co-host, and so I'm going to stop sharing. And if you would like to take over and share out, and when you're ready and lead out for us, that would be great. Okay, so welcome, Zariah. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask for a little bit of grace, just because in our organization, we are a Teams user versus a Zoom user. So I'm going to try and attempt to share this. I'm not as proficient on Zoom as I am on Teams, but here we go. Are you all able to see the screen?
Not just yet. When you hit share hit share full desktop. Yep, there you go.
Okay, now, and I'm going to try to switch over to presentation mode.
Yep.
And then hopefully I won't lose all of you. Can you all see it? Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. So, I really wanted to take the opportunity to just really thank you for taking time out of what I'm sure are very busy, long days, and for inviting Joe and I this evening to share some of our leadership perspectives that, quite frankly, we've developed and matured along our professional journeys of, between 20 and 30 years for both of us. And it's all of those learnings along the way, from being in the trenches all the way up until the roles that we are in today as chief officers for the Los Angeles Department of Power and Water, that have really shaped us into the leaders who we are today. I also think that, as I learned more about Joe's leadership journey, I think that one thing that we both have in common is that our professional leadership development has a real undertone of trial by fire, no pun intended. For me, that literally has been the case, is trial by many a fires. As Adrian introduced me, my name is Zariah Oliver Griffin. I do have the pleasure and honor, quite frankly, of serving as the Chief Resiliency and Emergency Management Officer for the department. And it is a brand new position that our CEO, through tremendous insight and experience, thought that it was important to have someone in the chief officer role. I continue to say she had a crystal ball that she refuses to tell anybody that she has. But my first day at our headquarters was on January 6th, and the fires broke out on January 7th. So, that's just a little context there. But as far as my background goes, as Adrian mentioned, my career in the utility business began about 21 years ago. And over the trajectory of my career, I've worked in the trenches and rose up through the ranks of safety management, electric and gas operations, emergency management, crisis communications, and now at the Los Angeles Department of Power and Water, and that I will refer to in our acronym as LADWP, otherwise it's a mouthful. So, and as I look back at my career, a common theme throughout all of my career stops has been having to do really hard things and learning to navigate adversity. My current role being absolutely no exception to that. In my current role, I oversee 4 new emerging high-profile areas for the department, which is emergency management, the rebuild of the Palisades community post-wildfire, the 2028 Olympic Games, and building a brand new climate resiliency portfolio. However, today I'm going to focus my leadership as it relates to leading the department through its response of the Palisades wildfire. And I'm going to share a couple of pretty impactful images as I talk through this. So as you can see, this was the view from our CEO's office as she was facing me, and we were having a conversation about our preparations for the wildfire and how severe, should there be an ignition, that this could be. So we were literally in the midst of that conversation when I saw her face just turn completely, almost sheet white, like she had seen a ghost. And all she could say is, "Turn around." And this is what we saw right here. At that very moment, given that this was my 5th wildfire that I would be managing, I knew what we were going to likely be facing. I didn't know how long it was going to last, but I knew it was probably going to be really intense. So, one of the things about this Palisades fire is that it has completely re-engineered and redesigned and frankly transformed how the department does business and what our customers expect from us now as a utility. The Palisades fire was unprecedented, as many of you know, for the city of LA and certainly for the department. It garnered global attention. The community lost everything. You can see this is probably one of the only buildings that was standing, and it was just complete devastation. You drove through that community and it looked like something, like it was a war zone, quite frankly. And honestly, it continues to face tremendous uncertainty. People lost everything and then some. And we absolutely cannot lose sight of that and the human aspect that we need to always take into consideration as we make really difficult business decisions in this journey with the community. As I said, this is my 5th catastrophic wildfire that I've helped to manage while being at a utility. This one, however, was very, very unique for me. And let me give you a little bit of context. While I had extensive experience managing wildfires at a utility before in San Diego, I was also surrounded by a response team that also had experience managing multiple wildfires at a utility like this. So it was nothing new for us. And we almost got to a point, like as experience does, we found a cadence and we had a high degree of trust and we were in the trenches together. And we could almost finish each other's sentences, right? After doing this for 15 years together or so. But as I mentioned earlier, this was the first time anyone at LADWP, with the exception of myself and our CEO, had ever gone through a catastrophic wildfire like this. As I mentioned earlier, it was also my first full day on the job. And, I knew no one other than the CEO who hired me. Certainly no one knew me yet, my background, my leadership abilities, nor did we have the luxury of time to have built trust, a key ingredient that's required for to navigate a situation like this. Our employees, something that was also different was our employees had never endured a 24/7 response requiring nonstop high intensity decision making every hour of the 12-hour shifts that they were asked to work for, and we were working 2 12-hour shifts every day. And this event lasted for over 28 days, just to provide some perspective. Our employees were scared. Some of their own families were being impacted by the fires. They became incredibly tired, incredibly stressed. And while many of them had trained in incident management, the majority had never been stress tested by a real life scenario like the one that we were facing. There is really something to be said for experience gained in real-time situations like this. So I quickly realized that if we were going to be successful in this response, I was going to have to meet the team where they were, not where I expected them to be or where they needed to be. And what does that look like? So we found relief for people when we saw them hitting their max. We were transparent in providing information to the broader organization, and we kept them updated and informed daily. Even when we had to say, you know what, we took 3 steps back. We took 3 steps forward yesterday and 4 steps back today, but here's our plan to get through this. We also really watched out for each other, especially when the stress skyrocketed, and made sure that our minds were in the game. And we even did small things. We celebrated the small wins that we had. We even celebrated some milestone birthdays where people gave up time with their families because they needed and wanted to be part of this response. And so, we wanted to let them know that we were recognizing their important day. I continuously reminded the teams that even when things got really hard on any given day, that together we had made it through the uncertainty of the day before, and that we were going to lean into that experience and into each other and make it through the current day, regardless of how difficult it got. As a leader of that incident, I needed to also help the team pause and assess data from all of the noise. And let me tell you, around that wildfire, there was a significant amount of noise every single day that could have been a disruption to us. We also broke down what felt like really big and overwhelming things into smaller bite-sized pieces that were more manageable to problem solve, and that people could lean into their own expertise that they brought with them. I always tried to ask leading questions to help guide people to where they needed to go while leveraging the expertise that I knew that they were confident in. And also, I quickly recognized that as their leader in this response, it was my responsibility to bring all those small individual pieces together and weave them into a broader strategic response on behalf of the organization, while also providing calm and certainty in the decision-making process that we were undertaking every single day. I would say that I needed to be at that particular time very, very disciplined in modeling the behavior that I expected from the team. Every minute, every hour, every day of that response. I never wavered. I didn't have the luxury of wavering. I also never wavered in encouraging the team and insisting that myself and the other incident commander always made data informed decisions. And whenever the data took us in a different direction, we pivoted and we adapted. We also never wavered, and I also never wavered from keeping our customers at the center of all of our decision making. And you ask why? Because ultimately, those are the individuals that we are there to serve. All of this collectively really helped the team adapt quickly to a rapidly changing and dynamic situation. They themselves were transforming their decision-making processes in real time and very, very quickly. The data-informed decision-making also really helped us build and maintain a sense of transparency and trust, because there were understanding of all the factors that were driving the decision. And even though some of the folks, even in the room, may not have agreed with the decision, they understood the data behind that decision. And that just inherently built trust. Talking about trust, I want to talk a little bit about authentic leadership and building that trust. For me as a leader, authentic leadership, and I know it's something that's used a lot, it really has become a non-negotiable for me as an individual and how I live my life. And I really do see authentic leadership from four different dimensions. One is cultivating awareness. And what I mean by that is, pause. As a leader, we always need to pause before we react. Take those couple of seconds or the couple of minutes that it requires, and just, broaden your awareness, cultivate that. The second dimension for me is developing ourselves through complexities. Challenges don't change, but our lens does. And as we mature as leaders, that lens should also be adjusting and maturing. And eventually, we learn to trust that what really felt impossible last year becomes our flow today. Quite honestly, last year, it was unbelievable to me what we experienced as an organization, what our community experienced. And there were moments where I was like, I'm not sure how we're going to get through this, but I know we're going to get through this one way or another. Today, it's a natural mode of operation now, right? I lean into that experience. And if we can make it through that together, using the decision making that we did, we can make it through anything, regardless of how complex it gets today. Also, another piece for me as part of authentic leadership is integrating my shadows. And what I mean by that is addressing any unfinished business that I have. Our teams, whether we realize it or not, feel the weight of our shadows, even when our shadows are in blind spots that we have. So I would encourage us as leaders to take the time and step into a zone of discomfort, make yourself a little uncomfortable, and clean up those shadows so that you can create an environment where people can really thrive and rise. Because, I've really learned that leadership really gets pretty simple when you focus on doing whatever you need to do as a leader, where you can lift others up and help them rise, because in them rising, you also rise. And lastly, I would say authentic leadership also means showing up for our teams, taking action when we need to take action. And as leaders, we have to make really hard decisions, and we have to make some unpopular decisions. But again, if they're data-informed decisions, and we are leading through a lens of what is our why, which I'll speak about a little bit later, then we're going to show up for our teams. Over the course of my career, I've developed, let me switch. I'm trying to do like multitask here, and I don't think I'm doing a really good job at either here. So let me get to this slide. Here we go. Okay. So over the course of my career, I've developed 2 key leadership strategies, if you will, that anchor me not only in my day-to-day leadership, but especially when I'm leading through any type of adversity. And, first are what I call my 5 C's of leadership, which are clear, calm, confident, curious, and compassionate. And then also knowing my why and being very clear about that. So my first leadership anchor, being clear, always being clear with your expectations, with your direction, concerns. People should always know where they stand with you and where you stand on your positions. It should never come as a surprise to anyone. Being calm, especially when leading through adversity. I firmly believe that we all promote what we emote. And those that you are leading deserve this from their leader. They deserve calm, especially when they're surrounded by the difficult and by uncertainty. And then being confident. A reminder that our internal confidence is not dictated by external conditions. We are leaders because somewhere along the way, someone had confidence in us, and we have developed as leaders, and we need to show up with that level of confidence, regardless of what the external conditions are. Also, part of that responsibility of being confident is, where at all possible, know the conditions you're walking into, do your homework, and know your business, and know it really, really well. Also, being compassionate, be open, and humanize situations wherever you can. Sometimes we forget the human aspect when we're dealing with other individuals, when we're dealing with, with whomever it is that we're serving, whether that be customers or other peers. Actively look for opportunities to bridge gaps where you see that there's a divide. And is that a comfortable place to be in? Absolutely not. But it pays incredible dividends, when you can serve as a bridge. And again, as I mentioned previously, it is so critical to meet people where they are as their leader and bring them along to where either we expect them to be or the situation needs them to be. And then lastly, being curious. Decide well in advance whether the situation that you're walking into or that you're in requires you to be directive or to ask questions. If it's the latter, then guide people by asking them questions rather than giving them the answers. Eventually, one or two things will happen. They'll either get to where you need them to go, and then they'll own that. Or you will learn something along the way, and you will be the one that's pivoting in the direction that you think that you should be going. There's a quote that I came across early in my leadership journey and that I've held on to tightly, and it has served me really well, especially when I want to, my instinct is to be directive in my leadership. And that quote says, leadership is not about answers. It's about holding the space needed in which answers can emerge. So just contemplate that, for a little bit. And finally, as a leader, I firmly believe that I must always know my why. in whatever situation I'm in, but especially when facing difficult times and adversity. And for me, that framework, as you can see on the screen, is being crystal clear about why am I here? What are the facts? What's the data telling me? Data tells a story and it's neutral. We are the ones that attach emotion to either facts or data. And then what are my objectives for what I'm here to do based on those facts or based on that data? And then I always try to be really clear about who am I here to serve? It's that idea of servant leadership. And once as leaders, we're clear on our why, I will tell you, it seems like everything just tends to fall into place one way or another. It may not fall into place the way that you hoped or that you thought it should, but it falls into the place that it needs to be in. And then we as leaders need to adapt to that. So I don't know how I'm doing on time because as I presented my screen, I lost my clock on my screen here. So I hope I didn't cut too much into your time, Joe. But now I'd like to invite Joe, who I hold in such tremendous high regard and has been a tremendous leader along with me, especially during, all of the incidents that we've had to manage over the course of the last 12 months. So you are going to learn a lot from his leadership journey and his perspectives as well.
Thank you,
Joe,
Zara.
I'm going to stop sharing unless you want me to keep sharing.
Can you keep sharing and then
Yeah,
if you just
absolutely.
advance the slides?
Yeah.
I'm going to cheat and save a little time.
Joe,
It's
you can
okay.
take your time
It's
as
okay.
well. There's no
Thank
pressure
you.
to hurry up, Joe. You just take your time as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Zariah, and thank you, Dr. Donato, for having us. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate you taking the time. I know, time is short, and obviously we want to share as much as we can that's hopefully applicable to you in your career journey. I know everybody who's joining today has a different place in their career, whether you're a recent grad or been in the workplace for a while. One of the things I want to tell you is a little bit about me, but before I do that, I want to just mention the example I'm going to share is from an incident that happened 7 months after the Palisades fire. So we as an organization were able to quickly put into practice lessons learned from Palisades. The Palisades response incident was overwhelming, so significant. The lessons learned, though, were also numerous, even though I think we did a really good job in how we handled that, in large part because of our CEO, Janice Quinones, as well as Zariah, and the discipline she brought. And if you can imagine, I hope you all can appreciate your first day on the job, essentially dealing with this type of a magnitude of the Palisades incident. We all got to know each other really well, got to build trust quickly, also understood the incredible skill. Game knows game, and Zariah's got game. So we and her team that she's now built are really doing much better. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about with the Porter Ranch incident that we faced in August. But before that, I just want to mention professionally for me, as Zariah mentioned, and Dr. Donato, I've been working for about 30 years. I started my career in Florida. Florida is a wild place to work. I worked for 2 mayoral administrations, one in Miami-Dade County, Florida for about 7 years, and then here in Los Angeles before I came over to DWP, primarily on the communications and policy side in both of those roles. My career really has been grounded in crises. Big city mayors deal with crises as a matter of course in their business. Toughest job in America to be a big city mayor. Always dealing with incidents that blow up. For example, for me, I started with the murder of Gianni Versace on Miami Beach, election 2000, and hanging chads and all of the drama that ensued in the state of Florida during the 2000 election. That was so dramatic. Some people on this call may not have been born then, but you can read about it. I realize that it's not as relevant to mention election 2000 as much anymore, given current situations. Elian Gonzalez, the little boy who washed up on shore, who was an orphan in Miami-Dade County, and the drama that ensued there with him for months. Also, we had a billing problem at DWP that essentially lasted 10 years, ended up with one of our general managers still in federal prison as a result of that incident, dealing with FBI in your offices and all of the communications, reputational issues that stem from that type of an incident. At UCLA, we flooded Poly Pavilion with a trunk line rupture back in 2014, and then of course the Palisades fire. But more recently, and building on the example that Zariah started by explaining the Palisades incident, in August or early August, we faced a very significant crisis with water supply in the northern San Fernando Valley, area called Granada Hills and Porter Ranch, where we had an outage. Basically, across our entire service territory, water pipes in our system operate on different pressure zones. So we have many of these pressure zones across the city. And one of those zones is in this area. Crews were doing maintenance at a pump station that feeds a 10 million gallon water tank that serves the area. They shut a valve down to do regular maintenance work. You know, and that essentially the pump station there refills that tank as customers use it. They shut it off to do work. Tank starts draining some. They go to turn the valve back at the end of the day. Mind you, this valve is connected to a 54-inch trunk line. It's a 54-inch diameter pipe. The valve stuck. So basically, we're at a point where the valve is stuck in the off position. So this 10 million gallon tank is now draining based upon how people use their water, and eventually is going to get down to they'll run out of water, not have any water serving this part of the city. We end up finding out rather quickly that this valve that was stuck not only was stuck, it was located 20 feet below ground. And it was in an area where there were all sorts of unmarked utilities. So our crews typically in the past, thank you, Z, have been able to restore these types of situations quickly. They get in there, they dig it out. The race was on to try to get this thing fixed by the morning, where we anticipated, because when people wake up and they start showering and using water, demands increase, right? So overnight, they were racing to try to do this. They end up finding out that you've got a high pressure gas line, which is that large pipe that goes across your screen right now. They've got fiber optics that serve the entire city of Santa Clarita, which would have killed internet service and 911 service to that part of the area. It ended up being an extraordinarily complex challenge, and it ended up lasting for us 8 days. So we found out at 4 p.m. on August 5th. We issued a first public alert that called for our customers to conserve water that evening, basically telling them we're pretty sure we're going to run out of water. Please start conserving now. At 11 p.m. that night, we told them the tank would likely be drained by the next morning, and they would leave about 9,000 homes and businesses without water. 9,000 homes and businesses equates to maybe around 30,000 people, just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the impact. So this is a pretty serious situation. And at this point in time, we had no idea how quickly they'd be able to get this valve unstuck. It was a race against time, but as they explored and waited for utilities to come out and mark their lines, they ended up finding out this was going to be an extended outage. But we didn't wait for that to happen. We mobilized our EOC that night. Soraya and her team stood up that operation that evening. We ended up working through that operation for 8 days through this incident. And really, I was going to say that evening in the 11 o'clock press release, we told people we will have water distribution set up for you customers by 9 a.m. the next morning. That is something that would not have happened in prior incidents. It would have logistically, the challenges there were really significant to try to get enough water out to an area to service that many customers. We had water facilities open at 2 locations that day. And eventually we ended up actually standing up in the course of about 24 to 36 hours from when we found out. We had as many as 6 water distribution locations at one time. We had mobile showers and laundry that we set up. We had recycled water distribution stations so that we weren't using drinking water. People could come fill up their jugs or their buckets, and we had some for them to go water their plants or any non-potable uses. We even delivered water to elderly at their doorstep, or others, people who couldn't get to our water distribution sites and who contacted us. Our IT department created an app in a matter of less than a day that was basically processing orders for water to get out and deliver water to people who needed them. We refilled ponds, and we even had a request for water for horses at a property there. Apparently the horses didn't like the water we brought them the first time, so we brought them different water. And we did this all while communicating the status of this incredible repair job that you're seeing visuals of here via text, email, social media, on-site media interviews, press releases. And the head of our water system ended up doing actually some Instagram reels that were straight to camera, basically explaining what this job was. And we also even used local influencers on Instagram. If any of you know the LA area, LA in a Minute, Evan Lovett, we reached out to him, who we had also done a piece with after Palisades. After Palisades, we did a piece with Evan about a week and a half after it started. And this time we did it in a matter of the first couple of days to help get the word out about it. So overall, customers largely understood because they saw what we were doing. And it's one of the things we've learned in really a lot of what we communicate at DWP is people don't understand how utilities work. They expect when they turn on the water's going to come to the faucet, the water's going to come out, turn on the lights, electricity, etc. When it doesn't, it's a mystery. So when we show them, they understand. It builds confidence. It builds trust. They see what we're doing. We explain what it means. And that's an issue that really is about transparency and about that value. So overall, in our review of that incident and the very few customer complaints, frankly, that we received about it, even though it was a tremendous inconvenience for customers over the course of 8 days, like I said, that this incident went on, we were very pleased and we felt that we exceeded expectations. And just to pivot a little bit to kind of the lessons and leadership principles here, as Zaraya mentioned, our CEOs made it clear serving our customers, our community, and our coworkers are our highest priority. Our values really are around transparency and clarity and making information easily understood. And really, I think Granada Hills demonstrated our adaptive capacity, as well as integrity in telling people exactly what was happening, what it meant to them, and what we were doing to fix it, and why it happened, and what we're going to do to prevent it in the future. So just in terms of skills overall, and I know we should wrap up here, but just briefly, I think it's important if you're in this business or interested in it, is to just ask and realize, can I be the calm in the storm? As Araya mentioned, cool under pressure. That's something that you learn over time. Sometimes you learn by observing, sometimes you learn by participating in a small way, and you grow those skills over time. I think for me, in my role, both in customer and in communications, obviously it's very important to review past events and learn from them, but also it's about knowing your subject matter and your subject matter experts. People don't necessarily want to hear from a spokesperson all the time. They want to hear from an engineer who can explain it in terms they understand. And for people who are, I spent a lot of my career sort of translating for attorneys, accountants, engineers. But if you're in any of those professions, the communication skills that you develop around them are critical. There are a lot of attorneys, there are a lot of engineers, there's a lot of accountants, but the ones who can communicate well about what they do are the ones that in our organization of almost 12,000 employees are extraordinarily valuable because they can help explain in simple terms what's happening from a position of authority and knowledge. The other thing is just, if you're in a management position, setting up your staff for success and positioning them well. I oftentimes have managers that report to me who feel like they have to distribute it evenly. And I remind them, certain people have certain skills that, especially when your back's against the wall, you need to put people in the best position to succeed. And externally, I think it's just about anticipating your customer and your audience needs, grounding it in your values and in your principles. In our case of putting our customers first, thinking about them first and foremost. And then another really important principle really is correcting as you go. We do not have perfect information. People understand that. As long as you're speaking earnestly, frequently, clearly, they understand if you have to correct information that you put out previously, so that they have better information in real time, just like you do and your crews do when they're repairing a job. And then just the key to building external relationships, whether it's with community leaders. During Palisades and during Granada Hills, there were some people who reached out who knew me over the years and knew they could trust what I was saying and telling them and explaining them. They share that information with their networks informally, as well as through your formal channels. And then with reporters, it's key, whether those are informal influencers on Instagram or people who engage with you or reporters from major media outlets. And I just want to mention, just in terms of for us, is really successes build confidence. What we went through with Palisades not only built trust and relationships within the department, which were so key for our executive team, but also we built our capacity. We understood where we had gaps and where we needed to grow. And that's something that we continue to do to this day. So just a brief snapshot of kind of how we were able to kind of reflect and then build upon rather quickly. LA, we've been blessed with, just like San Diego, a lot of great weather over the years, not as many crises, but we're facing them more and more frequently. These have given us an opportunity to learn from them. We've really seized that as a department and as professionals. So thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to share.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Thank you so much, Soraya, too. And just some really great insights in terms of authentic leadership, adaptive leadership, leading from the why, the trust, transparency, big themes that kind of come through. And we want to just take a couple of minutes just to open up for discussion, open up for questions. Anybody that might want to write something in the chat box, and as far as a question goes, and then we can have Joe and Soraya address that for us, and give you a second here for that. Okay. So kind of while we're waiting, and people are thinking about their questions, I do have a question. So maybe I'll just lead out. But I'm curious, how would you say that, coming through the adversities, like those are really big issues, particularly the Palisades, and how would you say that coming through those adversities has strengthened your competitive advantage as a utility company? Like I've talked to Janice before, and LAWP has some really big visions. They want to be the best utility customer service provider in America, And so how do these kinds of elements feed into competitive advantage and seeing yourselves as rising to the top in light of and all those other utility companies that are out there?
I'll start. I'll just mention that, as utilities, we have defined service territories. So it's not a direct head-to-head competition,
Right.
but we certainly want to rise above the others. And that starts at home. That starts with your own board. That starts with your local media, with your policymakers in the mayor's office. I'll tell you that both of these instances and our ability to mobilize, for example, the city's EOC was trying to stand up an operation during Granada Hills, and we were outpacing them. We were lapping them, frankly. And they recognized that. And so they stood back and led us and said, hey, do you need our help? We as a department were handling, just a massive response to provide and care for our customers. So I think it starts at home. I think it also includes sharing amongst your peers in the industry, telling your story. For us, in events like this, frankly, many people don't know a whole lot about how the department works. They know a little bit based on stories they've heard, or sometimes they have their own building problems. So it is sort of a key opportunity with those instances to share those successes, to build upon those successes. And sometimes the positive is the story that doesn't get written. It's when something goes well, and it's smooth, and people are like, oh yeah, that happened, and they might be reminded of it. So just in terms of reputation, it's limiting the unforced errors and shining when the spotlight is on you and being clear when you're doing so.
Thanks, Joe. Soraya, any thoughts or?
Yeah, no, I think, we are in competition with ourselves, and being better than we were, yesterday or a month ago or a year ago or 10 years ago. And that's who we compete with. And I will tell you that, going and speaking at different industry conferences about our experience and having other utilities come and share their lessons learned and feeling like they could be transparent with what worked and what didn't. And us doing the same, we're becoming better as an industry as a result of that.
Yeah, that's great. Great. Yeah. So Carlos had a question here. How do you plan and build out considering budget limitations?
I'll just mention that from a historical standpoint, because I've been with the department 20 years, or I joined just in the last year and a half or so. We invest a lot. We are a $7 billion company. The amount of money spent on our joint operations like emergency management, communications, customer service, historically, we've underinvested. So we've leaned more toward investing in replacing transformers, cables, wires, pipes, etc. But our IT systems have been underinvested in, our emergency management response systems have been underinvested, and the human capital that makes those things work. So there is a huge new focus that Janice has brought in on bringing in really great experts like Soraya to help lead development of those areas. The other thing is from a budget standpoint, keep in mind that our labor costs are about 25% of our total budget. Compare that to other city agencies like fire and police, where it's like 90 to 95% plus. Okay, we are a capital heavy utility where the vast majority of money is going for things like purchased water or the infrastructure in the ground that we're replacing. So the labor costs are not as challenging to deal with, to budget for, and to invest in as one might think compared to other industries.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Joe. So one other question, Elizabeth, she's asking, how did you ensure that lessons learned were communicated and corrective actions were implemented? Maybe Soraya, can you address that one?
Absolutely. So, first we brought everybody into a room over the course of multiple days, and everybody that responded to the incident from the field level all the way up to the executive level, participated in our after action reviews. And, no stone was left unturned. We wanted to hear even the smallest detail of what didn't work. And then we began to track it. And every quarter we communicate to the organization where we are. It's a sense of transparency, and things that we have achieved, and then process improvements that are in place, and then target times. And then if we don't meet those target times of completion, we're very transparent about why not, and whether we've had to course correct or what additional things that we're doing. So we communicate organization wide on every incident. We do an after action report after every incident as well.
Great, thanks. And then Jasmine has a question. She's wondering, talking about the Palisades fire, were the same steps taken for the Eaton fire, or do they have the same level of support? Like, how is that one managed?
And they had a significant response. I'll be honest with Palisades. We were all so focused on our respective areas that I don't have as much insight there to their response. I know the county fire chief was very vocal, very clear about their response at that time, and very helpful, frankly, in the media, especially. We all had a lot of help from CAL FIRE. We all had a lot of help from mutual aid partners. So I don't have the details specifically. I don't know, Soraya, if you had other additional insight, but I think overall everyone was doing everything they could with all of the resources available and then some, because it wasn't just these two fires. There were about, I think, 12 fires over the course of about 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks in January, some of which were put out very quickly, thankfully. But it was a really horrible time to be in emergency response.
All right, thanks. Great. Any follow-up questions from anybody that would like to take advantage while we have Joe and Soraya available? I do have their contact information at the end of our slide deck that you will be getting a copy of. And so you'll be able to reach out to them in a follow-up if you would desire to do so. Okay, but anything else that you might want to?
There was a question that just popped up that was directed to me that it got cut off. If we have time, I'd love to answer it now, or they,
let's do that. Go ahead. How frequent AAR is being conducted? How long is the session? How to ensure psychological safety? Soraya.
Yeah, all great questions. So we do our after action reports typically within 2 to 3 weeks at max. We aim for 2 weeks, and the reason after the incident closes out, and the reason for that, it's because the law of recency, right? We want people to be able to talk about what their experience was, what worked, what didn't work, when it's still fresh in their mind. We actually also provide at the end of every shift the opportunity for people to jot down while things are really, really fresh in their minds. And then they turn that into my team, and then my team starts a running list. And from that, we start kind of putting some main themes up that people to help people think through the incident. And we probably average anywhere from 7 to 10 different sessions, in the course of a 2-week period, and they usually run about 2 hours each. So we try to make ourselves available to anyone and everyone that would like to participate at all levels. And how do we provide psychological safety? It happens over time. We are very protective of the information that people give us, and we always tell everybody to speak in terms of pick apart a process, never a person. Right.
Right. Yeah.
There was one more question that came in. I just wanted to address it. It said, did you have any issues holding people accountable? What I would say is the after action reports are about process and about operations, right? I think whenever you're responding to incidents like these, you will have personnel issues that come up, right? The vast majority of your staff, 99.9% of them, are exceeding everything you've expected of them. There are instances where other people don't. And I will just, without getting into details, I say yes, there are instances where we hold people accountable in these. They're few and far between, thankfully, but it is possible, and it did happen.
And we did address it right away. We had to.
Yeah. And Sean had a question also. He said, Sean says, I'm curious whether you conduct premortems, that is, assuming something has gone wrong before it actually does, thinking about all the potential causes.
Premortem meaning like, do we prepare for?
I think it's kind of in the frame of risk mitigation, thinking through the what ifs, and
Right.
What do you do in terms of something like this with a Palisades fire or a Granada Hills water line break, and is your team looking at, you have the data, but then what else is coming our way that we need to be considering based on the data, perhaps, right? The forecasting of what are some of the pit holes we could fall into is what I think Sean is going with that.
So I'll start with that, Joe, and then if you want to augment me, that'd be fantastic. We have a separate risk team that is all they do, is they evaluate the risk of our assets, the risk of conditions, the risk of our of our ability to respond. They take in all of this data that they're gathering, and then they compare it to what our actual responses were, and then we start addressing those deltas, and then we start forming like working groups of subject matter experts across the organization to start generating ideas on how we're going to mitigate future risks. And then once we have that identified, then we start testing those against our preparedness plans, and we start making adjustments based on lessons learned from previous events. And it's an iterative, organic process, and we're continuously improving, our overall responses.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have anything to add to that. I did see the next couple of questions about how do you address trauma impacts your team, and what strategies do you use to stay calm in emergency situations. I think we all relied a lot on each other, frankly, and I think these questions kind of go in tandem, because you stay calm because you stay focused on the mission, you stay focused on the job in front of you, whatever that is at that moment. The sort of coping with that comes later, and there were tears later in terms of just what we all had gone through and been through. What we didn't mention is that during the Palisades fire, we had 2 lockdowns at DWP, one with a credible threat of a person with a firearm, a long gun in our garage, that LAPD responded to, and it was in the news, where we were trapped basically in our building. I happened to be trapped in the garage, and it was pretty upsetting. And so you rely on each other. You rely on family, afterward. It was a lot to go through, but nothing compared to the people who lost everything in fire in the Palisades. This all just touches on a lot of emotions for a lot of people. We had employees, as Zaraya mentioned, who lost their homes during this. So it's a matter of perspective. I actually lost everything that I owned in a fire a month before I got married, 20 something years ago. So it rang those bells for me. But you stay focused and you rely on each other. And I will say, our boss, Janice, has brought in about half of our executive team are brand new professionals and half are holdovers that have been with the department a long time. And she spends a lot of time on culture and relationship building and putting us in rooms like we never have been before at the department to get to know each other, to learn how to work together, to do strategic planning together, to scenario play together. We've spent so much time together as an exec team, both in this incident, but even since, that is building and strengthening those relationships. And it really pays off when your backs are against the wall and you have to perform.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Joe. There was one other question too, that Carlos asked, and how do you address trauma that impacts your team? Zaraya, do you want to maybe address that one?
Yeah. So first, I think if you are going to step into a role of as an emergency manager, or crisis responder, it's because on some level you're engineered for a role like that, because they're not easy roles, and you learn really quickly that they're not roles for everyone. And so, with my teams, because they have to be so compartmentalized and they have to help lead the response. I had one employee that had never gone through something like this before, and he just delivered on point every single day. And about 2 days after, the response was over, he came into my office and he just broke down. And, he's like, I think that I need some time off. And I know it's going to be impactful to the team. And I'm really struggling with whether it's the right thing to do. And I told him, I will be very disappointed in you if you do not take the time off and take care of yourself and take care of your family. And do what you need to do. And the rest of the team covered for him. And just that act of compassion and, treating somebody as a human being and not as a producer or a machine has paid tremendous dividends. And, and some folks are going to take advantage of that, but that's on them. Right. Most employees that I've had in emergency management over my course of my career have always done the right thing. And I've always encouraged them that where they need help from EAP, that it's there, or if they need other resources available to them, I help them with that. And I provide space for them, whatever that looks like. And it's like, and if you're a parent, it's like, giving space to your child. You're all part of the same family, but everybody has their unique needs. And as a parent, you need to be mindful of what those unique needs are. So say it's no different with employees.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ryan. So one other question that was posed here by Eric. He says, being innovative is important. How do you and your teams try to do that to improve the overall organization? What do you do as teams to be innovative within the organization?
I mean, for me, it's listening to my staff. I mean, people came up with great ideas and we let them fly. It's like, hey, what's the worst that can happen? You might film something and it doesn't turn out great and we don't use it. And we're plenty of times when we didn't use the, videos we filmed, but some of them, the ones with Anselmo Collins, our head of water system, ended up being viral, hits and super helpful to customers. So try new things, open ideas, talk to your team, think about sort of what's the most effective way to either respond or get the word out. For us, it was really leveraging Instagram in a way that we knew people, it would resonate with them. So that was one of the more creative ideas that had come out of Palisades that we used immediately with Granada Hills. So from my perspective, I don't know, Zaraya, if you had more to add.
Yeah, I tell people, and I create an environment where it's healthy to challenge each other, right? I'd rather we challenge each other in the room and generate ideas as far-fetched as they may seem, because like Joe said, the worst that can happen is we all kind of agree that that was a far-fetched idea, and we keep going, or it produces an aha moment. It's like, wait a minute, and then there's something that you hold on to, and then your curiosity kicks in and you start inquiring, and before you know it, you have a great idea on your hands that is very innovative and forward thinking, and then you support it, and you drive forward with it. I mean,
Well,
what's the worst that can happen?
yeah, let me give you an example on the Granada Hills. Our water system actually, from Palisades Fire, they had met a company called Wildfire Water Solutions, and these are a group of firefighters that have formed a company up in Oregon. As soon as this happened, our water system was thinking about it, head of our water, and he's like, let's call them. Well, they have high velocity pumps and large hoses. They ended up laying, like a mile of pipe down from one water zone to pump it into another to keep water in the system, basically bypassing that tank that we have. So they figured out in real time under incredible pressure and got the resources down to do it. These guys had just come down and demoed things about 2 weeks before this incident occurred. And so just to give you an idea in terms of innovation, it actually ended up being that a lot of the people who were affected by the water outage that were served by that tank had some water pressure because we were pumping water into the system through pipes in another part of the neighborhood while fixing the stuck valve. So I know it's probably a little difficult to follow with a short story, but the idea is they were innovating in real time, bringing in resources, problem solving to try to make sure we get water to our customers while we're fixing the problem over those 8 days. It was amazing. And we're also using right now Wildfire Water Solutions to provide redundant backup while we have to drain San Ynez Reservoir to replace the cover with a permanent new cover now. So you end up with long-term relationships. That company is going to help us be more resilient moving forward. And as the Rise team's working on contracts with them as well for helping us out in the future.
So, yeah, that's great. Yeah, the idea of failing forward, curiosity, being vulnerable and humble to recognize that maybe it's not my idea, but it's a great idea as a team, and let's move on it, right? And so, really great principles. So, well, all of us here are benefactors of your hard work because we're all USC alumni. So we've been on campus at different times at USC. We have been some of us live in LA City. And so, you can see even from the chat box that we're just so happy to have people like you who care for us, who are interested in us, the sense of community that you've communicated, Joe and Soraya. And we just want to say thank you and thanks for being with us. We do want to be respectful of your time. I know we wanted to have about 45 minutes. We've gone over by 15 more. So thank you for sharing with us. And we'll look forward to getting you some USC swag here as a thank you. Okay. And oath on that. All right. So, but I hope that everybody's been encouraged. We're going to stay on to do some leadership reflection. But we do want to just say thank you to both of you. And so thank you for being
Pleasure.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. So welcome back, everybody. I hope that you have been able to just jot down some notes along the way with relation to some of the principles that were shared by Joe and by Soraya. We do want to take some time for leadership reflection. Okay. And so Simone, if you can just drop in the PowerPoint into the chat for everybody so they can get a copy of this. That would be great. And if you could drop in the leadership principle packet as well, that would be great. We have a couple of resources that we just want to make sure that you have as takeaways from this time to be able to reflect on. But also, we want to just give some time for you all to be able to meet each other, to think about your leadership and be able to share out as USC alumni where are we at and where are we at in our leadership and what are some of the things that have helped us to maintain clarity and confidence. We all have a story. Joe and Soraya have come in to kind of prime the pump, but all of us over the course of our career, whether we're early, mid, or late career, we have stories and we can be strengthening the Trojan family with those stories and with our outlook. And so we just want to give a few minutes to be able to jump into the Zoom rooms breakouts, and Simone is going to manage those for us. And we'll give you 10 minutes in groups of 3 to be able to think about this first slide on leadership reflection, and then we'll come back together probably at about 8:16, somewhere in there. Okay, so Simone, if you want to break us into groups, that would be great. I appreciate that.
The groups are now live. You guys can start to jump in.
This is a time that we just want to open up, and on the leadership reflection, what are, question number 1, what leadership pattern or principle from the keynote resonated with your current career challenges, and why is this? Maybe 1 or 2 of us can just share out about what your thoughts were in your group. Okay, so would anybody like to lead us out with that? You can just click unmute if you would like. Okay, so
a couple things that we talked about in our group was the ability to stay calm, and that you learn that through experience, and that calmness transfers to the people that you're dealing with too. When they see that you're calm, then that helps them stay calm and get through the situation. Also, we spoke about how at the water department, how they seem to have the complete support of their CEO, and that she was there and enabled them to hold people accountable to get things done. And that's one of the most critical things that I believe, and that's one of the challenges that I've had in my career, is making sure that even before you start making decisions, that you have the support of whomever you report to. And that shows your team that you've got the authority to get things done.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really critical. And that was a good point that they made.
Thanks for sharing out. Yeah, really great. I'm sure you all built on that with a great combo too in the short time that you had together, right? But significant drawback takeaways. So really great. Did anybody choose any other leadership principles from the document that we provided you? Was there anything that stood out that was related? Thanks, Carlos, for posting in the chat there. In my group, we were just fascinated with what each of us is doing. Yeah, that's awesome. So, yeah. It's great when you get together with like the alumni, because everybody at USC, they always do great things, right? And I did my doctorate in the global executive program with Rossier, and the people around me were just amazing people. And you don't get into USC without having some sort of an incredible background, right? So then when we all get back together, it's like, hey, this is cool. I get to be back with some of my colleagues, So thanks for sharing that, Carlos. That's great. So, we provided that document with leadership principles. We're hoping that this will kind of serve to just have some takeaways. And then one of the other things that we wanted to do is just give a little bit of space, because the goal of our Trojan Family Reconnect or Connect is that, we can think about leadership and where we're at in our career, but also how is it that we're building on our goals, and what are some of the ways that, in alignment to our conversation even today, what are the things we're pursuing that we would like support in or insight in, and what's maybe an insight or a connection or a leadership commitment from tonight that you're taking with you, and is there anything that anybody would like to speak to in that regard? Maybe we could just, instead of going to a small group, just since we're already in a pretty good number here with the 12 of us, we can just share out as a group for ourselves, right? So anything that you would like to talk about on points 1, 2, or 3 there? We don't have to go in order. You could just pick one out. Okay.
Well, in my particular case, as now in retirement, and I've been in retirement since 2021, I still have a role to play in terms of bringing technical skills to people in my undergraduate program at Cal State Northridge, for instance, that mentor students in their environmental occupational health and safety group, because they want to know what happens to an alum 50 years after they get out of school there, and how I did things that I never learned at that university. And the same thing applies when I'm at the Viterbi School at USC, to those students there that want to know what happens to you when you're following different tracks, and you have to be receptive to systems engineering principles and the like. And then when I'm at UCLA Public Field School of Public Health, the same thing. They don't see the insights of what USC is doing in a particular area, doing studies that they should be aware of or may influence their career path as well. So I don't mind circulating between campuses and dressing up accordingly, but I think it spreads the wealth, and I think it's a way of giving back. It's the karma of giving back your years of knowledge and abilities back to younger students and inquisitive minds who need a little bit of help, and sometimes maybe a little pinch on the butt type of thing, in order to move their process forward so that they can get better clarity of what to expect into the future.
Yeah, that's great, Marty. Breaking down silos. Way to go. Way to go.
Yeah, why not?
Getting that crosstalk going, man. So that's great. So yeah, for me, one of the things I think an insight, for me is just a good reminder that I took away from Joe and Zariah and the conversation that we all had there, was just really the amount of care that we need to have in our work. It's easy to become complacent. It's easy to become jaded. It's easy. We're all in the day-to-days, 40 hours a week. We all work in a variety of fields, but I think with their field being community-based, community-driven, like they said, we don't compete against anybody but ourselves, because our market is our market. It's LA City. They're a branch of the LA City LA City department. Okay. And so they're a department within the LA City structure. And so really just reflecting on that, I think for me was a great thing tonight, of just the care that people can have in doing their job well. Okay. And caring for others. So, and letting that drive us. Right. So the why, kind of going back to the why, what she was talking about. So anybody else want to share out anything that, any of those questions, or you can hit on if you'd like. Okay.
I would like to address number 2, and maybe Dr. Donato, this is in your area, but I graduated too from Rossier with in the OCL program, and I'm curious to know, do you know? I mean, what's going on as far as companies opening up or supporting organizational change and leadership efforts within their companies? It seems like they're not aware of programs like those at USC. And it's some of the jobs that I see, they stick to the same old, are you ProSci certified? Are you dealing with AdCard? Do you have this? Do you have that? And, when I talk to people, it's like, well, I go beyond that. That's nice to have, but I've got additional tools, and I talk about different things. And I just don't see any receptiveness to that. And I'm just curious, for anybody who's dealing with organizational change and leadership, what do you think what's going on in the industry?
Great question. Great question. Yeah. So just a little bit of my background. So I finished the Global Executive Program, the EDD, in Rossier, but then I actually was working for OCL within the Org Change and Leadership Department. And I worked 7 years. I was a full-time professor for 7 years in OCL. Okay. And so what you're sharing is actually pretty consistent with what all of our students who are graduating are sharing, that there's a real lack of awareness of the nature of change management and what Rossier is producing and added value within its student body. Okay. Because that is actually the core of the curriculum at Rossier, whether it's the Global Executive ED whether it's the online learning and development technology, whether it's OCL, gap analysis, problem solving, performance improvement is the backbone of all that. And so what's happened though is people have gone the standardized route, okay? And so ProSci, PMI, PMP, all those certificates, they're all standardized certificates, okay? And so what companies are doing is they're saying, we want to have you get this certificate because there is a value add there, okay? But what they don't realize is that that certificate is designed for organizations that are unlike each other, okay? So when you're dealing with organizations that are unlike each other, having one certificate for all of them is a misapplication. And so what the student has to do, what the graduate has to do, is create that differentiation. And what I've seen where I've seen it happening most in my own practice in the consulting realm is it happens most in what I would consider the drip method, where I just send articles to CEOs and say, hey, I was thinking about you. I read this article. Take a look. It's short, and I just want to give it to you so that you can have an idea of something to talk about with your own colleagues when you guys are together. But it gives me something to follow up with them on. But it also begins to show them that there really is a difference between a customized program and someone who really understands the nature of change within organizations versus someone with simply a certificate from ProSci, And so it's a space that has to be cultivated. Okay.
That's really good info. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question, Elizabeth. It's great. So we have 3 minutes left. What I would like to do is just kind of hit this application point. Okay. So if you haven't done so already, if you don't mind sending a message to one person you met tonight, maybe we can just drop our emails into the chat box if you're willing to do that. Does that sound good, Simone? Would that be a good way to do it? And then,
or the LinkedIn's. People have been dropping LinkedIn's URLs.
Yeah, you could drop in your LinkedIn URL. So that would be kind of aligned with offering a connection or a resource to someone you met tonight. Usually in LinkedIn, you have some articles there as well that you can tag into. Maybe you might want to schedule a follow-up conversation with someone that you met tonight in your small group, okay? Or maybe just in our conversation today, people thinking that they're thinking like-mindedly, and so you might want to connect with them. And then something else is to just text yourself one adversity that you're currently facing and a strategic clarity insight that it's revealing. Like, I think, Elizabeth, that was a great question too. Like, particularly, how do we create space for our expertise and the use of it and the value of it? Okay. It does happen, but it takes effort. And so we want to just text ourselves or message ourselves or jot a note to ourselves and applying the takeaways from today. All right. So this is hopefully you've enjoyed the evening. I hope that you've been encouraged. Hope you have some principles to take with you. In terms of just our own contacts, thank you for joining us. My information is up there, Dr. Adrian Donato, Zariah's, Joe's as well. That's in the slide deck that was dropped into the chat box. And so you should be able to get that. If you, Simone, do you mind dropping the chat in there, just the slide deck in there one more time, just in case somebody may have missed it, as well as that, the sheet. Okay, that would be great. I'd appreciate that. And then, go ahead. There we go. Yep. Perfect. So they're in the chat box and you can just click on those and it'll download to your computer. Okay. All right. So thank you everybody for joining us. Simone, thank you so much for being a great hostess to us. And then we'll look forward to doing it again next year, right? Come February next year, we're going to be doing this again. And so be aware of the links, be aware of the communications, and I hope that you all have a great evening. Okay.